Have you checked out the Somebody You Love Patreon yet?
For just $3 a month, you can get every episode without ads and you get them a day early.
For $6 a month, you get all of our bloopers and behind-the-scenes action.
For $10 a month, you get monthly bonus episodes.
And for $20 a month, you also get the bonus episodes as videos.
You can cancel anytime, and when you sign up, you get access to everything that we've posted so far.
We also have annual subscriptions where you save 10% and get 1 month free.
Patreon.com/somebodyyoupod, as in podcast.
You do have to type in the URL because Patreon hides 18 plus creators from the search, so you most likely won't be able to find us by searching. That's patreon.com/somebodyyoupod. Welcome to Somebody You Love, or The Sale of Two Titties. I'm Jenna Love.
And I'm Holly Hart.
And we're experts in disappointing our parents, breaching community guidelines, and banging the people who vote against our rights.
Before today's episode, we would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are recording. I'm recording on the land of the Ngunnawal people.
And I'm on the land of the Darug and Gundungurra peoples. Today, Jenna, will be our guest, essentially. Holly's going to interview me a little bit. And I just wanted to acknowledge that what I'm going to talk about is the way that I tour and how I do things and how I've come to do things over a few years of doing this. It is definitely not a how-to guide, and it's definitely not reflective of everybody in the industry who does go on tour. I feel like it may be useful for clients to gain some insight and for non-workers to gain some insight. But I think for workers, like, it might be valuable if you are already a touring escort. You may be like, oh, I'll take that little thing that Jenna does, or, oh, why does she do it like that? The way I do it's way better. But yeah, I just would say it's not a how-to guide. And a lot of the things I do, I'm able to do because a lot of the privileges that I have within the industry. But I'm just going to share my experiences, and that's all we can do.
Okay, touring queen. How do you decide where you're going to tour?
So when I decided that I was going to give touring a go, this was, I think, towards the end of 2017. No, I think it was in 2018. I don't know. It was a few years ago. I decided to do one tour to a number of cities around Australia. So each of the capital cities and then a couple of others. And I just thought I'd give each of them a go and see what happens. As we've covered on the show, I do love a spreadsheet. I do love data. So I sort of did that over, I think, a 6-month period. And then I sat down and I looked at which of those cities I made the most profit, which of those cities I made the most money, like income and profit, and also which of those cities I had the best time in and that I most kind of wanted to return to, because I think that's a really important factor, particularly in the work that we do. So, for example, one of the places that I made quite decent money, which was higher up on the earnings, I actually had a really crap time. I just had a string of not very pleasant clients, nothing dramatically awful, just not particularly pleasant. And I was like, well, I made okay money, but I don't really want to go back there. Like, that just doesn't appeal to me. So that got crossed off my list. And then another example, there's a city that is quite expensive for me to get to. I don't need to be vague about it. That city is Perth. It's quite expensive for me to get there because it's a long flight. And so the profit I make when I go to Perth doesn't tend to be as high as other cities, but I have a really great time there. I've just lucked out and got some really great clients. So I continue to go there. So for me, it is about where I'm going to make the most amount of money / how I'm going to be feeling when I'm there, how much I'll enjoy it. A great example is Adelaide, where, and this is the thing, the laws play into it quite a bit. So the first time I went to Adelaide, which is in South Australia, where sex work is essentially criminalised, I cried every night. I was incredibly stressed. My screening was a lot more heightened because I was worried that I was going to be, the subject of a sting, which is not very likely because of my aforementioned privileges, but it still can happen. And so I turned away a lot of clients because my screening was really strict. So as a result, I both had a bad time because I was stressed off my tits, and I didn't earn that much money because I was turning away a lot more work than usual. So that was really low down in my list. Fast forward a couple of years later, I fell in love with somebody who lived in Adelaide. And then that changed everything for me because I was like, well, you know, for one, now I've got somebody who lives nearby who can bail me out, worst case scenario. Just knowing they were around made me feel a lot better. And obviously I had more desire to go there and spend time with them. Then we broke up. And so now I don't have the desire to go back there again. So yeah, there you go. That's how I decide where I tour.
How do you let people know where you're touring or when you'll be in their city?
So I have a system. I have a two-stage system, but COVID forced me to turn it into a three-stage system, which is that the first step is that I let people know who have already paid me money and that I'm holding on to deposits for. And that's the COVID step that had to be brought in. So everything going according to plan, lol. Next week, which actually will be last week when this gets released, I'll be in Perth. And I have deposits that people paid me at the beginning of 2020. So I've been holding on to their money for 2.5 years, and a couple of them.
They are keen.
Yeah. And you know, it's really generous and lovely of them to have said, yep, just hold on to the deposit until you can get back here. I've tried a few times. As we all know, the last couple of years have been a ride. So obviously the first people I had to contact when I announced the Perth tour was those people who I have money from. So I want them obviously to have the best opportunity to book in. The next step is I have a mailing list, and that's organised by city. So I contact everyone who is in any of the cities that I'm announcing a tour for, and then so they get the first kind of opportunity to book in after the people with deposits, if that's a thing. And then finally, I'll announce it publicly, which for me, normally I just announce it on my social media. You can announce tours on a lot of advertising websites, but I always forget to do that. I tend to not really use advertising sites too much and just rely on social media. So yeah, it's a 3-step process for me.
So it doesn't really work to text you, just every few months and say, hey, when are you coming to my city? Is that not an effective
It's not very
strategy?
Effective. No, I wouldn't suggest that. I mean,
Okay.
in my case, like some workers will have like their regular tour cities. Some will have places where they're available to go by appointment sort of thing. Like they're happy to kind of go there if requested. On my website, it says where my regular places are, and really anywhere else, someone's going to have to pay for me to get there to inspire me to go there, if that makes sense. And that happened a couple of years ago. Somebody flew me out to their city. I drove actually, but they paid my travel costs for me to go to their city. And I was like, okay, great. I was completely open with them and said, well, I've never toured this city before, so I'm going to turn this into a little tour. And obviously didn't make them pay for all of my travel costs then. And then that was an opportunity for me to scope out that city. And I did not do very well there at all, so I haven't been back. But yeah, if somebody wants me to come to their city and it's not on my normal roster, they're going to have to pay me more than other people do.
What do you look for in tour accommodation?
Yeah, so this is a big one. I tend to book in my accommodation before I announce my tours, partly because now that I've been doing it for a few years, in most of the cities I have a regular place, so I want to make sure that place is available, but also because it's really tricky to find places that are workable. And it does depend on the laws in each, depending on how kind of strict the laws are, that factors into how difficult it is to find an appropriate place to work from. So for me, I don't like staying in hotels. I really like to have a kitchen and a laundry where I stay. In fact, it's not that I like to have a laundry. I cannot stay somewhere without a laundry. And that's mostly because of my squirting. I've covered this a million times on the show, but, every booking that I do, I go through at least 3 towels and 1 sheet. So I can't rely on a hotel's housekeeping for that. It just wouldn't.
Yeah.
It would not work out.
Even just thinking when I used to work from a hotel, I used to find it, I worked in a hotel often that had a dryer, a washer-dryer combo.
Oh, yeah.
And so it washed, didn't dry. No drying would take place. It could be in there for hours and hours and no drying would happen. But I would see at that stage several clients a day, probably on par with what most touring workers do, because when you're at the accommodation and when you're paying for it, you want to maximize how many bookings you do and make it worth your while. And even the towels and sheets that I would go through, I would have this big pile and then I'd have to jam them all in this suitcase and get them all washed and dried at my home for the next day to take them back to the hotel that I'd go back to. So even imagining what it would be like for somebody like you who squirts that much, I can't imagine how you'd live. You'd have to run to a laundromat or have some sort of it just wouldn't be viable for your business. And then what? What if you had housekeeping? Would you just pile 11 towels and be like, I don't know.
They'd be like, why are these 11 towels soaking and smelling like sex?
Yeah.
It's pretty.
Yeah.
And I know, I think,
lot.
maybe for work, because a lot of workers do stay in hotels. And I think if they are lower volume, which we generally mean to say they're seeing fewer clients, if they're only seeing 1 or 2 a day, then that's probably a lot easier to manage. But and same as you, I bring 2 suitcases normally. I bring 3 bags. And one of them is pretty much just towels and sheets. Yeah. Because, I just have to. So, I've got to have a laundry and I've got to have a dryer that fucking works because as you've experienced, so many dryers just don't. So one thing for me is when I'm looking through pictures of the accommodation, I will, if I can see a picture of the dryer, I'll Google it and try and work out that's a big factor for me. I've gotten to places where the dryer's been terrible and then I've just had to bring clients in and I have had towels laid out everywhere and I've just been sorry, the dryer's not very good. And I mean, that's fine. It doesn't affect their experience, I guess, but it's not as nice if they walk in and there's laundry everywhere, So, laundry, massive one for me. And the other one is, kitchen, because I find it's very, very easy on tour to just order delivery all the time, particularly for me because where I live, we don't really have much in terms of food delivery. So whenever I go to a city, I'm like, oh my God, I can order everything. So I get very tempted. So the way I do things is I put in a Coles click and collect order on my first day or for my first day so that when I arrive in the city, I can go pick up my order and then I've got stuff to cook for the next few days. And it's just more sort of sustainable. And it means I'm eating proper food that will actually get me through those few days rather than just eating junk, which is very tempting.
Very disciplined.
I am, but you have to be because it's hard on your body. And the first day of eating junk is great, but then the next few, it's not.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think a lot of clients probably not clients who listen to this podcast because they would be very understanding of what is involved in our job. But I think people who maybe don't think about it don't realize that when a sex worker travels out of their home city, they go all the way somewhere else. So they do the travel part, whether that be driving or flying. They get all the luggage there. They check in, they get the room ready with whatever they need to, do their hair, do their makeup, and then see, 2, 3, 4 clients of an evening. Then, they clean all of that hair and makeup, lingerie off and clean the room and have a sleep and get up the next day and see 5 clients, 6 clients, maybe more, and do the whole thing again. Just how exhausting that is. I think people vaguely might be aware of it, but I think when you really think about it like that, it occurs to you how important that sleep is, how important nutrition is, how important staying somewhere with facilities is, because you can't just duck off in the middle of the day to go and do some laundry or, you can't really afford sleep-ins to sleep in half the day. So, there's a lot of pressure on you to manage your time efficiently.
And it's we've got options, obviously, we could take fewer clients, but as you said, once you've got all those costs, there's this, once you're there on tour, the pressure that you put on yourself to earn as much money as possible is huge because you go, well, I'm spending money to be here. I could be just sitting at home, but I'm not. So while I'm here, I may as well be earning money. Like it's literally the whole point.
And not just the financial factor, but as you mentioned a couple of days ago, the emotional factor too. When you've got pets and a partner at home, you think, well, if I'm going to be away from all of my family, I might as well work while I'm here.
Absolutely.
So, I can see how the nutrition factor is very
And there's
important.
a guilt element that comes into that too. Like anyone, if you're away from your family, you sort of feel like, well, it shouldn't have to be this way, but I can't help but sort of go, well, I need to be earning good money here because I'm sacrificing the time away.
I think these
from
are
my
normal
family.
emotions.
Yeah.
Sure. I had a lot of guilt when I first became a sex worker in general about, or I wouldn't say guilt, but maybe just feelings of shame about the job. And my whole thing was that I'd better be earning a lot of money, because if I'm going to have this reputation, or if I'm going to, and I think that that's just natural human emotions when you do have some sort of guilt or shame associated. And obviously I don't feel that with the job anymore, but definitely when you're leaving your loved ones, or when you're putting yourself in stressful situations, or your loved ones in stressful situations, you think, well, fuck, I want to be rewarded for it.
And I think it's probably normal for anybody who runs their own business, is that there's that thing of,
I think so.
No one's going to earn the money for this business but me. So the bottom line is either I take these extra bookings or I don't, and the money doesn't come in, and it's completely down to me. And I think especially when you're newer to the industry, it's really hard to make that call. I'm now a lot better at going, I'm okay. I don't need to take on that extra one because that's going to screw me up tomorrow, and then I'm not going to be as good tomorrow, and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of things that go into that, a lot of feelings. The final thing that is really important in tour accommodation is working out how the client is going to get to your room. And this is really, really tricky. And this applies to people looking for in-calls as well as just tour accommodation. But anybody who has stayed in hotels in the last few years will probably be aware that the security is increasing. It's really rare to find these days hotels that do not have, or serviced apartments, etc., that do not require swipes for the lifts, which means that you can't just go straight to someone's room. They have to come down and swipe you up. Now, if you're a sex worker, particularly if you're a sex worker in an area where the work is not fully decriminalized, then you don't want to every couple of hours be going downstairs and have the hotel reception see you picking up a different probably man most of the time and taking them back up to your room, because it's pretty fucking obvious what's going on there, right? So if you're going to be staying in a place that means you have to go down to get them, then obviously you want it to be kind of discreet. You want the elevators not to be in full view of reception, but a lot of the fancy hotels, they're very in full view. Ideally, you want to have an intercom so that you can a video intercom as well, so that you can see that the person who has arrived is who they said they would be, and that you can let them up into your room. Now, I know, I'm pretty sure Airbnb used to have a search function where you could filter properties based on if they had an intercom or not. They don't have that anymore, which I say this as a joke, but I'm sure it's real, is whorephobia. I'm pretty sure that's exactly why they've taken that function off. I can't think of any other reason.
Couldn't imagine any other reason.
So I'm pretty sure that's just blatant whorephobia. But so what I do, again, is I scroll through all the photos and I zoom the fuck in on everything and I try to see if there is an intercom. And if I can't see an intercom, and particularly if I can't see a video intercom, then that place gets crossed off the list. So it's not foolproof, because who knows if that intercom even works, but based on the pictures, I can usually tell if there actually is one. They're my three big things, and there's a lot of other factors. For me, I always get 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms, that's incredibly privileged. That's something that every time I book a place, I'm like, oh, I really don't need to have a second bedroom and bathroom, but I'd really like to. And that's so that I can have a workroom and a sleep room, so I can decompress at the end of every day. And because I always need to go to the loo when the clients are showering. And I can do it in front of them, and I have done it in front of them, but it's kind of nicer if I can just quickly go do a wee while they're showering. So, yeah.
How do you schedule everything? I know you are an organisation freak, and I have seen before pages of the broad outlines of how you schedule things down to the minutia of detailed scheduling. So yeah, how do you plot out a tour?
Yeah, good question. So one thing I always do is that on my day of arrival, I will only take one, maybe two short bookings. So either one bigger booking or maybe two shorter bookings, or no bookings at all. The other thing I often do is I actually often arrive a day before I say I'm arriving, and I will contact...
Ooh, you heard it here first.
I know, secrets. But I will contact some of my really good regulars in that city and say, hey, I'm actually coming a bit earlier, because then I know that the first person I'm seeing is somebody that I know, that I'm comfortable with, that I like, that I maybe know isn't too physical in their demands or in what we tend to get up to. So it means that my first day is like, I know it's going to be a positive experience. I know it's not going to be too much stress. And I know, because I'm somebody who I've got to manage my stress, and this is why I'm a big scheduler. So some people might be able to get off the plane, get in and just get stuck into it. But for me, I find traveling incredibly exhausting and dehydrating. Then I've got to get into the space. I've got to set it up how I want to set it up. So I always leave like 3 or 4 hours before my first booking after arrival, whereas I know a lot of workers will just get straight into it. But I want to pick up my groceries. I want to get everything set up, and I want to work out, if I've not been to that location before, I've got to work out the instructions, how clients are going to get to me. I do little tests where I like walk around the building I'm a bit over the top. But so that's my plan for the first day. And then for all of the other days, my personal imposed maximum amount of booking hours during a tour is 8 hours in a day. I usually prefer to do 6 or 7, but I do 8 occasionally. And that's face-to-face booking hours. And you touched on this earlier, Holly, because so you've got to take into consideration all of the time in between the bookings. So I also try to leave myself an hour for lunch and an hour for dinner. So I, properly get to actually sit down and eat something and have a little break, because if you leave half an hour between bookings, that is absolutely no downtime. That is getting one client out. That's getting everything in the laundry, resetting everything up, touching up your makeup, having a shower yourself, getting everything reset up, and then letting the next client in. Like you don't stop if it's a half an hour between your bookings. So I always make sure I've got an hour for lunch and dinner, and ideally usually an hour and a half, because that means I can properly, I can put something on YouTube and I can properly have a little moment. But yeah, so like an 8-hour day, like that could be 2 4-hour bookings, or it could be 8 1-hour bookings. It could be 16 half hours, which I would never ever do. That would be absolute torture. I mean, I shouldn't say that. It just sounds like a day at the brothel.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. So I wouldn't be doing that. Thankfully, the booking system I use, I just have limits on it. So once it gets to that 8 hours, I can't accept any more bookings. So that's good, because that helps with my, maybe I could squeeze another one in brain. I should be working, I just can't, because the booking system won't let me. So that's good. But yeah, like if we say I do 8 hours starting at 10 a.m., obviously, I've got to start getting everything ready at like 9. Then there's all the time in between the bookings. Then the last one might finish at like 11 p.m. Then I've got to clean everything up, get everything in the laundry and whatever, maybe sort of done by midnight. Then you're so wound up from a day of being really on and really present and invested in people. It's so hard to get to sleep. So, often my tour days are, 12 to 15 hour days. And that's not like, I do have breaks in there, but they're pretty exhausting. Yeah. And then for me, a lot of people also will take a booking like the day that they check out. Like they'll just take an early morning booking and then leave. I don't do that because, again, my fucking squirting, God, it's a headache. I can't like put wet towels in a suitcase and go, so I clean up everything on the final night, and then in the morning I just get up and go to the airport or to my car if I'm driving.
Tell us about how clients can make touring workers' lives easier.
There's lots of different things. Before even getting to the tour point, I would say a big one is paying deposits. Again, not every worker is the same, but for me, deposits are absolutely essential on tours. My rule actually, since the day I started touring, was that I would not leave for a tour if my costs hadn't all been covered by the deposits I'd already received, so that if I got there and every single client had to cancel, I wouldn't be down out of pocket. Again, I'm very lucky that I've always been able to do that. Not everyone is able to do that, and a lot of workers have to rely on fewer bookings in advance than that. But you know me, I'm a little anxious bean. I need everything planned in advance. So being comfortable paying up deposits is really important because we are outlaying costs. So we've got to spend quite a lot of money. We're usually booking a place in terms of accommodation that's a nice-ish place, so it's not cheap, and we don't want to get there and then suddenly not get any bookings. So in terms of when we're actually there, it's important to be aware of time. And I mean, this applies to clients of all sex work, but I think it is just that little bit extra important when we're on tour is arriving on time and leaving on time. You know, we are, as we've covered, we're there to make money, and it's all about the money to us. Sorry, sue us for doing our jobs. So, you know, we often have shorter turnaround times between clients. Like, I would never leave half an hour between clients at home, but on tour I do. So we do need our clients to be cognizant of that. We need them not to arrive too early, because then we've got someone loitering around. And then again, if there's hotel staff or reception, building management, and they're just seeing man after man arrive looking nervous, loitering around,
worse.
They're going to be like, oh, it's probably that new woman who checked in the other day. You know, like they can put two and two together. So if you do arrive somewhere early, you know, wait around the corner or whatever. Reading the instructions carefully is huge. As I said, I go to a fair bit of effort to try to make the instructions really clear. I'll be like, this is the address. There'll be like this sign to your left. When you turn to your right, you'll see this. Because a lot of these places are bloody rabbit warrens. Like, where was I? In Adelaide, actually, there was a place I stayed at, and I felt like I was giving clients like a treasure map. Like, it was, they had to go down so many freaking corridors to get to me, and they were all really well-natured about it. But I warned them. I was like, okay, it seems like a lot of instructions, but you'll get there. Trust me. So following those instructions carefully, we've talked about this on the show before, but I can't tell you how many people have not followed the instructions and then ended up lost in a building somewhere, unable to escape from the fire escape because they haven't, they've thought, oh, this sounds like a better way to go. Or they snuck in behind someone. Stuck in a lift is the biggest one. They've snuck in behind someone at the entrance. They've not buzzed the intercom. And then they get to the lift and they're like, oh, no, I can't get up. I'm stuck. This lift is going up and down and other people are coming and going and I can't get to the worker. And that's because you didn't read the instructions, which said that you needed to ring the intercom. One that has only happened to me once was a client, but I have heard of it happening to other people, was a client went to I was staying at like service departments, and they went up to the reception and said they were here to see Jenna Love.
Oof,
obviously, my room is not booked under Jenna Love because, sorry to break it to you, that's not my name. It's not the name of my credit card. So, yeah. So obviously they don't know who the fuck that is. And if you then know, like by that point, I've given the room number. So if you go and say Jenna Love in room blah, blah, you've just completely outed me. Like, that's unacceptable. Thankfully, like, they called up and I said, yeah, let him up. And it was all fine. And I've stayed there since. So that went swimmingly well. But yeah, obviously don't speak to staff about what you're doing there. Like, it's insane.
Yeah. I've heard of clients walking past and being asked by reception, and they're like, oh, well, I said I'm here to see someone. Just don't. Just say, no, I'm okay, thanks. No worries. I'm good. It's all, no worries. You know, you don't have to answer questions. They're not the police. You don't owe them anything. And I mean, the whole thing is, if you look confused and you're loitering, then you've already fucked up. Like, follow the directions as you've been instructed, or as I guess I do when I go to an out call and I go to a client's hotel, I walk straight in and I'll sit down somewhere discreet and I'll look like I'm meant to be there. Just open a book, open your phone. You know, if you're looking around nervously, of course, reception's going to say, hi, who are you here to see? What can I do for you? And I've had people before, sometimes reception, when I've gone to out calls, have been like, oh, can I help you? Do you need anything? And I'm like, no, I'm good, thank you. That's it. They're not really interested in your whole life story and what you're doing there unless you make it seem weird. And then they might get sus if you're being a weirdo. Yeah. But generally, they don't care. They're just doing their job.
Yeah, you're spot on. We do the same thing with out calls. Like, I'll sit in my car and read through any instructions I've been given and make sure I've got them in my head so that I'm not having to wander around and constantly check my phone and look weird. And yeah, I do exactly the same as you. If I've got to wait, if the client's got to come pick me up, I just stroll straight in, sit down on a chair, look like I'm just going to a day at the office or whatever, like confidence. And another thing is just to think about if you're going to be bringing gifts, which, as we always say, are not essential. But if you do want to bring gifts, just think about the logistics if the person you are seeing is touring. I've received a number of big bouquets of flowers and I've just had to leave them behind because I can't take them on a plane. And that sucks because the flowers are beautiful. And I'm like, wow, that was really nice. And these are lovely, but I just can't take them with me. Or something really heavy, something fragile. I have a friend who was given like this kind of sculpture thing, like a porcelain-y kind of thing. And she was like, well, I've got to get on a plane now. Like, I think she did manage to get it back unbroken. But just thinking about stuff like that is a good idea. Also, just be really nice to us, thanks, and bring tips. Who misses free and affordable ads without all the anti-sex rhetoric?
Assembly 4 is a team of sex workers and technologists based out of Naarm, Australia, who have a specialised understanding of the complex challenges workers face and are dedicated to providing solutions to amplify their voices.
Assembly 4 was founded on the belief that impact is more important than profit. They strongly believe that having the ability to make decisions about our bodies and sexual lives is a fundamental human right. Anyone should be able to make these choices without fear, violence, or discrimination. Sex workers are still fighting for this right. Tryst.link is a directory that lists thousands of independent adult entertainers, escorts, BDSM, kink, video, massage, and much more. They also have a huge amount of educational resources and blog posts about the sex industry that are well worth a look. Check out their website assembly4.com, that's for the word, not the number, for more info.
Do you get much time to see the sights when you tour?
No, definitely not. We get asked this a lot, and we get a lot of people who are like, oh, you're coming to blah, blah, you've got to see this, or you've got to do that. And we, like, the one that's really frustrating is when we get suggestions for things to do around the town from somebody who hasn't even booked us. You get that a lot. People are like, oh, you're coming to my city, you should do this. And, oh, they do the best coffee here or whatever. And you're like, cool, thanks. Like, great. But I mean, yeah, as we've said, we're there to work. And I know that there are some workers who will kind of tack a tour on the start or the end of a holiday. So there will be a holiday component, but generally that's not the point of us going to these cities. As we've talked about, there's that kind of guilt factor. There's the money already spent factor. Like, I'm not going to waste the time I've spent on that hotel by going out sightseeing when I could be earning money in that time. And even for workers who don't make sure they're, like, I only accept pre-bookings on tour. I don't take any bookings while I'm there. But for those who do, if they leave the hotel and then they get a message saying, oh, can you do a booking in half hour? They're like, well, no, I've just left now. And like, so they sort of, it's shitty, but they sort of feel like they've got to stay waiting in the hotel basically if they are wanting to get more bookings. Because it's like that thing of if you light up a cigarette, the bus will turn up. Like, you know that the second you go, oh, I'll just go for a walk around the city is when everyone will want bookings, So, yeah.
When you order pizza in the brothel. then somebody would turn up.
Exactly.
It's always the worst.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we're there to work. We're not on holiday. It's really hard work. I'm not complaining about that. I enjoy it and I like doing it that way. It suits me to have a really full-on few days and then I come home and play the PlayStation for a few days. But, yeah, it's not a holiday. We're not there for fun and for lols. And we barely have time to catch up with each other. Like every time you go to a city, there's always a bunch of workers that you know in that city and that you want to hang out with. And it's so often we just don't even have time to do that. We usually see the airport, the inside of a taxi or an Uber, and the inside of our accommodation. And that's it. Our misconception for this week is one that I did not realize so many people thought, and I'm kind of blown away by, is that sex workers can't say no, that they can't say no either to clients or to particular services or bookings or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's very obvious that we do say no and that we have a pretty strong set of boundaries. I think brothels maybe is where a lot of this perception comes from because the establishment has a set of sort of rules of what you offer, which usually are limited to about 3 things, which is massage, oral, and sex. Outside of that, what you wish to do and not do is pretty wide within the laws, obviously, and within the rules of the establishment. But yeah, it's pretty flexible, even in a brothel. And people who make you really uncomfortable, generally, you're allowed to say no to. I think there is, without going into all of the trouble of brothels, there are a lot of situations in brothels that I have heard of and experienced and witnessed where people have been, I think coerced is probably the right word, or pressured into spending time with people that they're not comfortable with or people who they don't want to see. So that's pretty shitty. But generally, sex workers have the right to consent to any sex acts. Anywhere. And I guess it just comes down to their preferences and sometimes to their level of comfort with asserting themselves in those spaces. Consent is such a complex thing, and you can consent to one thing one day and not the next with the same person or under a different circumstance. Sometimes you enjoy one thing sexually and you just don't another time. It's really not that straightforward, but basically no means no. No matter what your job is.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would go so far as to say that often sex work scenarios have more clearly outlined boundaries and rules of consent than civilian encounters do. I think that this kind of idea that we are, selling our bodies and that our consent is being bought is really ridiculous because we have lists of things you can and can't do. We have strict times when this begins and when it ends. We have, we have rules. We have screening, and everybody screens, including people working in brothels or on the street. It's just that they're different types of screening. And yeah, it does get into a murkier world when you are in a position where somebody else is managing you or somebody else is kind of somewhat responsible for your income. Like that is a different story. But I think that's a different question. I don't think that's the same thing that we're discussing necessarily. And it also gets into a murky area when money's tight and when you have fewer choices, right? Obviously, you are less likely to say no to something if you need the money. And that's a reality that exists in any industry. It's not a nice reality. It's a bit gross, but it is certainly not the case that sex workers can't say no. I say no all the fucking time. The amount of clients we reject, which again, I'm very privileged to be able to do that. We both are. But I don't think people realize how many clients we just say, nah, not seeing you, not seeing you, not seeing you.
Yeah.
And then how many things they ask and we say, nah, not doing that, not doing that.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe that, but it's going to cost you. We have all this negotiation going on that often is not taking place in sexual encounters outside of the sex industry. And I think that this idea that we can't say no it's funny to me because I feel less empowered in my civilian life to say no in general than I do in a work setting. you know.
Interesting.
And I think that's the case for a lot of women, to be honest. We're changing that, and I hope it continues to change. But I think that there is, you know, the pressure to be a yes man or a yes woman or a yes non-binary individual is really high, and we want to please people, and, you know, so, but that's a really complicated conversation, and that has nothing to do with sex work. And this whole idea is, you know, it's really stigmatizing, and it's why people think they can treat sex workers like shit because they think that we can't say no. And it's really, really satisfying when we make it very clear that we can. It's a good feeling.
Yeah, but I still get a lot of messages when I decline service with somebody, or when I have turned somebody down based on their attitude in any way, that they go, well, you're just a whore. You have to, like, there's still that idea that, that you have to, they're shocked. They're like, what? No, you're just a slut. You have to, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to be nice. I don't have to be accommodating to your bullshit just because this is my job. That's such a weird take. Right,
and it's also just hilarious because I am just a whore. These are the facts. And you are somebody who can't even get a whore to fuck you. Like, that's, if you wanna speak in facts, that's where we're at, buddy. Which is a pretty good segue into our shit people say for the week.
Last week, I received a message which got my panties in a twist, and not in the good way. It was, let's see. It was about 10:30 at night. I received available. Hey, are you in Queanbeyan? So it's two separate messages. The first one was just available.
Was there a question mark?
Yeah. Question mark? Yeah. Okay, and I think anyone who's ever listened to the podcast or had anything to do with sex workers knows that that is like one of the worst messages we can get. Straight up is hi, avail, or available. It's just so... You've given me nothing. Like, geez, absolutely nothing. And then I think he actually tried to call me a few times, which is all over my ads. Do not call me, message only. And so that immediately is the first thing to annoy me. So I wrote back and I said, what the fuck? Learn some manners. And he wrote back, what? And I said, available? ? And he said, well, fuck, what do you want me to ask? And I said, introduce yourself and use full sentences like you weren't raised by wolves. And he said, I'm looking for sex, not English class. And I wrote back, yeah, and look how well that's going. And then I blocked him, so he couldn't give me any more of his attitude. But like that's the whole point, mate. Good. Like you said, shit. I mean, you're looking for sex and you literally are failing at it.
You're failing.
All you have to do is say, hey, my name is X. Yep. I'd love to make a booking, wondering when you're next available. That would have straight away, it would have been like, oh, honey, check my availability. I would have been nice at least, but available. And I mean, well, fuck, what you want me to ask was never going to make me wet. So
no. Well, this is the other thing. I've seen people sort of comment whenever we've shared this kind of shit people say. I've seen people go, oh, you're all so sensitive, and oh, it's so easy to rile you up and all that sort of thing. And it's like, I think there's this misunderstanding of what's going on in these interactions, because the moment he wrote available, he was screened out. From my perspective, I got that message, I'm not seeing that client.
100%.
So I'm not
and then
upset,
it was just me taking the piss.
I'm just fucking around at that point. Yeah. You've already screened yourself out. Then you try to call me a few times. There's no way I'm ever seeing you, because you've just demonstrated a complete disregard for my boundaries. So obviously I don't feel like being naked in a room alone with you. Duh.
Yeah.
So it's funny that they just think that we have to accept anything. And then that if somebody is rude to us, that we're so precious, and it's like, oh, who do you think you are? And it's like, just a human being who wants some really basic respect and manners. That's all. Like
the bar is so low.
Yeah.
All you have to do is be polite. I'm not asking for much here, buddy.
No.
Anyway, I hope he found his sex and courtesy, you know. I hope he worked it out along the way.
That's it. You're helping as well. Like, hopefully eventually he's like, oh.
The real English class is the friends we made along the way.
And to be clear, this is not a situation where there's any judgment about somebody whose knowledge of English isn't perfect.
Oh,
that's not the case at all.
This was not an English second language issue. This was courtesy.
Yeah.
Question of the week. Timmy asks, what trends go in and out of fashion in sex work? Are there things that clients are asking for now that they weren't a few years ago?
This is a tricky one. I've definitely seen trends in who my clients are over the last few years. I don't think that's necessarily a trend in the industry as much as it's a reflection on me, maybe, and what I'm putting out there. Like lately, I've had so many bookings from women, which is just fucking awesome. I don't know what I've been doing right, but anyway, go me. I don't know if that's a trend. It could be that more women are learning that it's something that they can do and blah, blah, blah. Or it could be just that I keep fucking telling everyone that I'd like to see women. And so finally people are listening. I don't know. Over the pandemic, I think we all saw a lot of people that were really craving a bit more in terms of emotional support and intimacy and touch and cuddling, that sort of stuff. That's pretty obvious, I guess. Something that I've been surprised by over the last few years is how often somebody I've never met before will spank or go to choke me.
Oh, wow.
And yeah.
Okay.
And like I'm personally quite comfortable with both of those things. But
first meeting.
Oh my God, yeah. And like I can't imagine being a man, and it has always been men who have done this, being a man, meeting a woman I've never met before, having lived through Me Too and being aware of, a physical difference in strength, and then getting on top of this woman, a marginalized member of society, and putting my hand on her neck and expecting her not to fucking flip out. Like, I think that baffles me. And I don't want to blame porn, but I do have to wonder if there's an element where there is a lot of that stuff in porn. And I've got nothing against it. I quite enjoy it myself. But a complete stranger putting their hand around my neck is objectively terrifying. Like, it really blows my mind that they would just feel so comfortable hitting or strangling a stranger. And as somebody who has engaged in that sort of stuff with my clients who have specifically asked for it, it's required a lot from me to be able to do it. It takes a lot of work to get yourself up to a point where you are comfortable inflicting harm on another human being, So it really alarms me when people are just like, yeah, cool, I'll just give you a whack, So that might be one. I don't know. What about you? I feel like you've got better answers for this.
In terms of sexual trends, I definitely noticed that certain things go in and out of fashion. I think, and this is really the scope of when I've been sort of fully entrenched in sex work in the last 7+ years, what I've really noticed was golden showers was a lot bigger about 7-ish years ago.
Yes.
Every second person wanted to be, it was really, really in, and it was very trendy, and everyone wanted a golden shower. That was really big. I still have quite a few golden shower clients now. It's definitely not a really taboo thing, but it was much more common a few years ago. Like, I had it on my extras thing, and every week I'd have a couple. It was really big for a while there. About 2-ish years ago, I'd say that rimming was massive. I would say everyone wanted to do rimming. They wanted to be rimmed. Everyone asked about it. It was really trendy. Again, I think these things come a lot from porn, but that was a really big thing. And these days, I've still got clients who are into it, but it's not as frequent. It's not like everyone who texts goes, "Oh, do you do rimming as well?" That became very, very common. In terms of what I find is trendy at the moment, I don't think I've noticed anything post-pandemic except maybe a lot more cuddling. As you said, I feel like people at the moment are looking a lot more for cuddling bookings, or spending a lot more of their sexual bookings just wanting to have very long, intimate cuddles and just to be held. So that's the sort of things that go in and out of fashion that I've noticed.
I felt like pegging had a real heyday a few years ago as well. Me.
Yeah, maybe 4-ish years ago, 5-ish years ago for me. That's when I first bought a strap-on, and I had a lot of requests for it then, and now barely any. And I'm not huge on pegging anyway. I find it fucking, it's hard physical work.
It's sweaty. Yeah.
But, I'm happy to do anal things on my clients. But yeah, putting all that strap on work in is it's hard work. But yeah, no, you're right. It was quite trendy about 4 or 5 years ago, and I definitely don't get asked for it basically at all anymore. My strap on has not seen action, in a long time.
Then it's really hard to know. Obviously, a sample size of 1 or even 2, if we're comparing stories, is so small. Yeah. And I know that, like, when I used to be getting regularly reviewed by review forums, for instance, that was like somebody reviewed and said that I pegged them. And then every second inquiry after that was like, oh my God, you do pegging. And then everyone wanted to be pegged by me, And then same with like rimming. People were like, oh, you do rimming. So let's all go see Jenna and get rimmed or rim or whatever. So I think like that's a part of it. And just lately I've noticed I've had heaps of like clients under the age of 30, which is kind of unusual for me. And I've been like, where are all of these boys coming from? But is it something I'm doing in my marketing that's kind of hitting that market? Is it that a sign that sex work's kind of becoming a bit more acceptable and a bit more of an option for younger people to give a go rather than this thing that's reserved just for, older guys? I don't know. Like it's really, I think, the more I've been just sort of shown in the media and stuff, the more I've been seen by couples and by younger people. And I get a lot of clients who have never seen a sex worker before, and I get a lot of virgins. I never, ever, ever used to have that back in the day. Does that mean that more virgins or more people are first-timers coming to sex work, or does it mean that my face is out there a bit more, so I'm a bit more kind of approachable and that sort of thing? Probably the latter.
I've had a lot of virgins.
Yeah, me too. There's a lot of them out there.
Yeah, it's great. Such an honour.
Yeah, it's cool. I'm into it. But I mean, it's super hard for us to know, but I guess there are a few things that we've maybe noticed. And to be clear, I don't think that either you or I have like a kink for deflowering people or anything like that. But it feels quite special that somebody would trust us with something that, it doesn't have to be a big deal, but for them it obviously is a big deal if that's what they're going, I'm going to book a sex worker for this purpose. So it feels special that they're trusting us with that. It's not that we're just like, oh yeah, banged a virgin. Like that's definitely not.
We'd like to thank our sexy patrons. Our new giving somebody is Charlie. Our new very generous somebody, David. Our even more generous somebodies, Lachlan, Timmy, Steve, our footstool, James E. Scott C., our secret admirer, Andrew Adam Smith, Leslie, Ellen, Sub London, Scott Watson,
Miss Billy, Nora Knightley, Andrew, Wheezy, Fritzia Tits, Mr. E, Brandon, Simon, Alfie, Skippy, Greenie, Ophelia Parker, Aaron, Emily, Cobber, Nomad, and Rhiannon Rhodes. And our extremely generous somebodies are Aaron, Pete, Andrew, Sienna Saint, Brino, Adamore, Wombat, Josh, and Sergio. Thanks for joining us this week. It's been fun listening to myself talk. I hope you've also enjoyed it.
Thanks, guys.
Bye. Please look out for us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and Patreon. Our name everywhere is Somebody You Pod, as in podcast. Our Patreon starts at just $3 a month, and you can get all of our episodes ad-free and a day early, plus bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes action, bloopers, and more. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the voices of sex workers. And remember, somebody you love might just be a sex worker.